Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Something in the Wild podcast. I'm Tyler Smith, your host, and today we have the January 2025 Conservation Debrief. We have some information about the Utah land grab lawsuit. We have talk about some of Trump's day one executive orders. We got Colorado wolf introduction updates, Wyoming corner crossing cases. Draw season is here for Western big games. We have some updates for that. And then we got some seasonal activities that you could, do or do not, whatever you feel like doing. But I definitely am going to be doing some of them. So, without further ado, let's get right into it here with the Utah land grab lawsuit. So, for those of you unfamiliar, Utah, back a few months ago, their governor exclaimed that he wanted to take back the unappropriated lands that fall under the jurisdiction of the BLM in the state of Utah. Now, this adds up to about 18.5 million acres, and he was sending this order to the Supreme Court saying that it was unconstitutional for the federal government to hold unappropriated lands. Well, I have good news for all of us public land enthusiasts, all of the hunters, the fishers, the outdoorsmen that love using these spaces and would be basically stolen from if this were to go through. And that's that the Supreme Court refused to hear Utah's lawsuit. They said absolutely not. It's perfectly constitutional for the United States to use these lands, and we are going to keep it that way. We're not even going to hear you out, which is great to hear. Great, absolutely great stuff. But there's a little bit of a negative side to this. There were 13 other states that supported Utah's little stunt, their viewpoint there, and they came out publicly exclaiming that they were supporting Utah here, which is concerning, that there were so many states that were very willing to side with Utah. And, if this case were to be viewed by the Supreme Court, you probably would have seen other states do the same exact thing and sue the federal government as well to get their quote-unquote their land back, which in reality it's your land. So glad that the Supreme Court held their ground there. This is really, really good stuff for public land because people rely on this land so heavily. Even if you don't think that you do, even if you don't think, I don't think the federal government should hold land at all. Well, I'm here to tell you that everyone's affected by this land. If you are buying beef from the store, a lot of beef is grazed on this land. Fresh water, tons of fresh water comes from public land. I say this all the time, like 20 to 40% of all fresh water in the United States originates from national forest land. That's not even including BLM land, which I'm pretty sure holds a little bit more. The BLM holds a little bit more land than the National Forest Service. So, it's just a good thing that it got closed down. But unfortunately, this argument is not new, and it definitely won't be the last time that something like this comes up. So, us as public land enthusiasts have to stay vigilant, have to make our voices heard whenever arguments like this do come up, and just making sure that we understand the consequences if these lands were to get taken away. All right, moving on next to some of Trump's day one executive orders. So, there's been a lot of news about all of the executive orders signed. I'm only gonna focus here on one of them, and that is an order titled "Unleashing Alaska's Extraordinary Energy Potential." So, essentially, what this executive order states is that they're targeting oil and gas leasing in the coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, reversing the decision by the BLM to deny permitting for the Ambler Road, reversing protections for 13 million acres in designated special areas in the Western Arctic, expediting development of a road through designated wilderness in the Eisenbeck National Wildlife Refuge, revoking the conservation status of 28 million acres of public land that have been withdrawn from development since 1971, and reinstating the Alaska roadless rule, which will strip protections from more than 9 million acres of the Tongass National Forest. Now, what essentially is being targeted here on this executive order is developing, oil drills, extracting those resources from Alaska. Now, Alaska has a huge oil reserve, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that energy is not super, super important to the United States. But in my opinion, I think this is a short-term solution that sacrifices the long-term health of these public lands. Now, I think that there's a balance to be struck here, absolutely 100%. I think that the federal government has every right to at least extract some of those resources, but they have to do it in an ethical way that's not going to sacrifice, these wilderness areas, these places that we cherish so much as public land enthusiasts, and just to have these spaces that are still so vastly undeveloped. It's just amazing to know that they're there. Even if you don't make it out there, they still help with the climate. They still help with, water quality and all of that stuff. And to start drilling and to start extracting those resources and ruining these wilderness areas by putting roads in them, I just do not think that it's a good idea right now. I think that what would need to happen is to have some sort of committee, some sort of, consulting force that can then decide whether, okay, we can do this, we can't do that. Finding a balance here. That's the biggest thing with politics, with everything, honestly, in life. Everything is compromise and balance. You don't want to go too far in one direction. You don't want to go too far in the other direction. If we can find some middle ground between the hunters, the anglers, the conservationists, and these energy companies, and the the United States' need for energy, I think that there's a middle ground there that will both parties will be somewhat happy with. Not everyone's going to be happy, obviously, and that's just the truth of the world. But if we can work together, have our voices heard, and decide what's best for everyone, not just a select few on either side, I think that is absolutely crucial. All right, now let's move into the Colorado wolf reintroduction efforts that have been going on since 2021. They actually got voted in 2020, started in 2021. The current administration there in Colorado, so Governor Polis, doubles down on his efforts to get these wolves reintroduced. So as of right now, this introduction effort has cost Colorado $4.8 million so far. $4.8 million. And they have $2.1 million budgeted again for 2025. And that is coming straight out of the taxpayer wallet. And this is all according to the Colorado Sun. So a meeting turned sour when discussing the budget for 2025 as the governor of Colorado blames ranchers for the high cost of the wolf introduction. Governor Polis claims, in quotes, if their organizations, Middle Park and those guys, say to Wyoming, give Colorado wolves, they probably would, he added. The only reason they're not is they hear from ranchers that they shouldn't, so that drives up the cost. Now, Governor Polis also claims that Wyoming and Idaho would happily give Colorado wolves, which has been debunked by both the Wyoming Governor, Mark Gordon, and the Idaho Fish and Game Director, Jim Fredericks. The Idaho Fish and Game Director actually said, Idaho's experience leads us to conclude that the negative impacts of wolves sent to Colorado will not stay in Colorado. And basically, what has happened here and what he's saying is that whenever Idaho went through these same reintroduction efforts, they've had really negative experiences with these wolves and with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And he also included in this quote, he said, his experience with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's inability, quote unquote, to live up to its assurances about delisting the northern Rocky Mountain wolves when criteria were achieved and surpassed because of multiple lawsuits that continue today. So what's going on is Idaho reintroduced wolves, way back when. They have since established a breeding population, a healthy population. They're very, very stable, and they're actually growing. And there were promises whenever they first introduced wolves that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was going to delist them from the endangered species list so that they can then be managed by the states individually. And we're running into the same issue here with grizzly bears in Montana. Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, because, grizzly bears, their population is expanding rapidly, and, they're healthy, they're stable, they do not need any sort of supplemental support, and those are all the criteria that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service need to delist them so that the states can then manage them. Well, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is under a bunch of pressure from these non-hunting folks, and just like people in general that think, it's a grizzly bear, it's been endangered for so long, we can't take it off the endangered species list, when in reality they're perfectly healthy, and yet they're costing these states millions of dollars every year to manage them whenever they cannot even manage them themselves. So essentially what's happening is they're causing damages. They have to relocate them whenever they are involved in depredation cases where they're killing livestock and things like that, or getting in human trouble. They have to relocate them, have to spend that money that they are not really privy to. Like, they're not getting much subsidy from the government to take care of these animals. It's just causing a huge strain on these states to manage these grizzly bear populations without them having the opportunity to get in front of it and, help manage it, while also, charging money for, say, license sales or tag sales, or, people buying preference points and things like that. So, they're not making any money from these grizzly bears, and they just have to spend all this money on these grizzly bears. And that is the issue that they're going to run into again with these wolves, and that is what the Idaho Fish and Game Director is saying. He's saying, my experience tells me that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service isn't going to live up to, what they've said before, so I'm not even going to get involved in the wolf reintroduction efforts. We made the same mistake. I'm not making the same mistake again. I don't want any part of it. And that is why they're not giving wolves to Colorado. And this has led to a serious mistrust for these game agencies for all of these states. Same thing with Montana. Montana went through the same exact thing. And it's an absolute mess. And, they just want to stay as far away as possible. And I don't blame them for sure. It's a crappy situation. I do not want anyone to think that I don't want wolves in Colorado. I think that wolves should be, wherever they were originally from, in their native home ranges. But with that being said, you have to have the buy-in from your residents of Colorado. And, I understand, they voted on this, and the majority of the population in Colorado voted on this wolf reintroduction. But I think that us as hunters, those people in Colorado, those ranchers that live out there, I don't think that they quite understood the implications whenever it was first going on. I thought, maybe they thought that there's no way this was going to pass, and then it ended up passing because a lot of people that live on the Front Range, there in Denver. That's where the majority of the population is. I feel like a lot of them were like, hey, yeah, let's throw wolves back in there. Why not? Not really understanding the consequences. And it's just been spiraling, and they have already had to capture the original wolves that they put out there, brought them into captivity. One actually died while they were transporting it into captivity. And, they have since kind of healed those 4 remaining ones up. I believe there was 5 that they originally let out. And then they had some pups. But, then there was 4. One passed away. There was 4 in a facility, and then now they're bringing 15 more over the next year, I believe. So, I don't know. I mean, I just think that there's a lot that needs to happen as far as buy-in's concerned. I feel like these ranchers are very, very upset. These people that live where these wolves are going are very upset. And what's crazy is that they are now looking to throw these wolves, which, by the way, they're getting from Canada. They're not getting from any U.S. state. They're getting these wolves from Canada. They're going to throw them in the ski areas of Colorado. So, the counties that hold Aspen and Vail, those ski resorts. So that'll also be very interesting to see how that works. I think that's a better idea because those areas aren't they don't have as many ranches. They don't have as much livestock in that area as they did up on the northern border of Colorado, where the previous wolf pack was introduced. So I think there's less likelihood of them getting into trouble. But with that being said, again, you never know what's going to happen. I just hope that they can kind of find a solution here that is not going to cost the taxpayers of Colorado an exorbitant amount of money, which it already has. I don't have confidence there, but I'm hoping for the best. All right, now let's move on here to the Wyoming corner crossing case. So back, a couple years ago, there was this huge controversy, right, where these 4 hunters from Missouri had crossed from public land to public land on the checkerboard pattern that is currently, kind of situated there in the western United States. And for those unfamiliar with the checkerboard public land issues, there is about 8.3 million acres of public land that are completely landlocked by private land. So you cannot access them. There's no public roads, no public waterways into these parcels of public land. Now, what the issue is here and why this kind of came to be is that back whenever the railroad companies were settling the western United States, they broke up the whole entire United States. So think of the United States as a giant checkerboard. They broke it up so all of the black squares were private land and all of the red squares were public land, BLM land, owned by the government. And they've kept it like that ever since. And it these squares that we're talking about right here, they're one square mile. So I think it's 640 acres. So each of these 640-acre pieces are completely landlocked, and you just can't access them. So what these hunters from Missouri did is they brought a ladder, and they went from public corner to public corner with private, butting up against them. And the argument here is that this ranch, this private landowner, thought that they were trespassing because they passed through their airspace above their property. I mean, it sounds so silly. It sounds just so bizarre that they would be getting so worked up about this. But this has been a huge case. It's been seen by multiple courts now, and the company that is suing these hunters, Iron Bar Holdings, so that's the private land company, stated that these 4 Missouri hunters, they're suing them, claiming that these guys momentarily passed through private airspace. So they did not step foot on private property. They just passed through the airspace above private property. And where does the airspace start and where does it stop? Does it go 7 miles up into the air? Like, are planes trespassing too? And I think that is the argument here, is that they own like that airspace and you can't pass over like the airspace. Whatever their argument is. Their argument also, and this has been said in these courts, which I think just like proves that they are not correct. Their argument is that the rule would cost private landowners billions of dollars in property value by eliminating exclusive rights to public land. So the argument, faulty within itself, flies right in the face of the Unlawful Enclosures Act, which basically makes it illegal to block reasonable access to public land for the public, which is exactly what's going on here. Like, there is public land. There is a reasonable access point at the corners where you can cross over and you're not stepping foot on private land. And, everyone is happy. Everyone's fine. But no, these private landowners, they want it all for themselves. They buy this property. They're like, the real estate agent will lie to them and say, hey, like, that's public land back there, but no one can get to it because of this arbitrary rule that no one really understands if it's legal or not, corner crossing in this situation. And you have exclusive rights and you can use it however you want and do all this, So it's really the fault of the landowner that's buying this property to not do their due diligence and kind of understand that, hey, this is public land. But yeah, this company's just brought, Iron Bar Holdings just brought a lot of attention to this issue because they're really trying to get after these Missouri hunters. So I digress here, but what ended up happening is that in this case, there was a ruling by the 10th Court of Appeals that will give the public legal right to access those acres via corner crossing. As long as you are not stepping foot on private land, it is perfectly legal to corner cross in Wyoming. This is amazing news. I'm sure this will probably get appealed again. And who knows, it could make it up to the Supreme Court. We'll see. But this is just absolutely huge for public land. And this is going to give legal access to 8.3 million acres of public land. That's 4 times the size of Yellowstone. So great stuff here by the court, and to find these hunters not guilty. Just absolutely awesome. All right, now let's start wrapping things up here a little bit. We have draw season. It's finally here, and I want to start a new segment here where I'll kind of give you some deadlines for the upcoming month. So this is the end of January right now. We're talking about the deadlines in February. Now, there's already stuff that's gone on. Idaho's over-the-counter licenses for deer and elk have already happened. There's a couple other things that have opened right now. I know Arizona and New Mexico is open for elk and antelope and mule deer and things like that. But these are the deadlines. So February 3rd, Nevada points only for spring turkey. So it closes February 3rd. Colorado spring turkey application deadline is February 4th. Arizona elk and antelope application deadline, February 4th as well. Oregon black bear application deadline, February 10th. New Mexico black bear and turkey application deadline, February 12th. Idaho black bear controlled hunt application deadline is February 15th. And the Utah black bear application deadline is February 20th. So if you are trying to hunt any of these animals in any of these states, make sure you get all your information filled out and you're applying or you're buying points or, whatever you want to do, make sure you're getting it done because those all close this upcoming month. You got about a week before that actually starts kicking into effect here. So get all that stuff in. And lastly, let's talk about some seasonal activities that I'm going to be doing. So, obviously it's the winter. It's the heart of winter right now. It's, coldest it's going to be probably all year. We got ice fishing. We got squirrel hunting. We got steelhead fishing. We got trapping. I think I'm going to be doing a lot of ice fishing over the coming weeks, which I'm super stoked about. Maybe some, winter camping mixed in, some squirrel hunting, a little bit more steelhead fishing. I'm going to try and get out a couple more times. Haven't caught anything yet, which I've only been out once. But yeah, I love me some steelhead fishing. I'm going to try and get some late season action in there as well. Also trapping, I haven't really gotten super into trapping, but I would love to at least try it. I would love to, get some beaver pelts and make a pillow or a blanket or something. I think that would be so freaking cool. So, yeah. I hope you guys get out there, kind of enjoy that stuff. There's tons of other things that you can do, some winter fly fishing, especially if you're down south. There's much more things you can do in the winter than just this, but yeah, fishing's a big thing. So hope you guys enjoyed. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope you pick something up from this January 2025 debrief here. I'm going to be doing these at the end of every month, so just kind of give you a heads up what's going on in the conservation world and making sure that everyone is staying involved. So for all this stuff, man, make sure that your voices are heard for the day, for Trump's executive orders, for any sort of land grab lawsuits that might come up in the future, corner crossing case, Colorado wolf introductions, all that stuff. Make sure you're making your voice heard. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. Have a good rest of the week, and make sure everyone to keep it wild.